Welcome, everybody, to CBM Calling. My name is Terry Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of Canadian Baptist Ministries. And this is our 71st episode. Ever since the coronavirus crisis began back in March, we've been able to engage many amazing people across Canada and around the world in conversations like the one that I'm about to have today with my dear friend, Jonathan Wilson. So I want to welcome everybody to our call. Thank you for being part of it. And yeah, we're glad to have you here. And I'm especially happy to welcome you, Jonathan, to this conversation. It's great to see you. I know that you're in Nanaimo, you and Suwan, your wife, are in Nanaimo. If anybody watching this doesn't know Jonathan, it's your loss. Jonathan is a teaching fellow at Regent College in Vancouver. He's been a pastor. He's a missionary at heart, the author of more books than I can count, and more books than I've actually read, although I have read a few of your books, Jonathan. I do. Church Matters, God So Loved the World, which is a Christology for followers of Christ, God's Good World on reclaiming creation. As I mentioned, you're married to Suwan. Suwan is from South Korea, but she has worked in Bangladesh, Thailand, Canada, Israel. She's an environmentalist. She's a counselor and an HR specialist. You're also a father and a grandfather. And it's just delightful to see you. You're also part of our CBM family. So we're going to do something different. We're going to play a little game here, Jonathan. I've told you a few of the questions that we're going to discuss in a bit. But I decided that I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. And we're going to do a very first round of questions that you have no idea I'm about to ask. And I'm going to just throw a bunch of questions at you, and you have to give me your quickest response to them, and maybe a word on why you chose that. So you ready to go?
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Here goes. First of all, would you rather be a theological generalist or specialist?
Generalist.
Why?
Well, I'm just curious about so many different things. And I don't want to have to focus on one thing. In my writing and my teaching, I've tried to be a kind of moving target. And some of my colleagues at other schools say, wait a minute, what do you teach? What are you? And I like that kind of confusion. Some of my mentors and models have also been more like generalists as well.
Brilliant. Okay, you're the only person I know that ever worked at the Grand Ole Opry. So that leads to the second question. What's your favorite kind of music?
Oh, kind of depends on the mood. But if you told me I could only listen to one kind of music for the rest of my life, it would be jazz.
Oh, okay.
And a wide range of jazz.
Awesome. You and I would enjoy our jazz together.
Yeah.
Now, number 3.
Okay.
If you and Suwan could invite anybody over for supper tonight and enjoy a nice long conversation with them, I was going to say living or dead, but let's assume they're living during your supper meal.
Okay.
Who would you have supper with tonight?
Well, that's an easy one, pretty straightforward. I would want my daughter and son-in-law to be with us. They were supposed to be coming to visit us. They live in the U.S. and they can't come because of the travel restrictions. So I'd love to teleport them. Otherwise, if it were someone, if we extend it to living or dead and they could be raised for a brief time to have dinner with us, I think Suwan would want me to say Mother Teresa.
Wow.
And I would be happy to say that.
I think any of us would be happy to have shared a meal with Mother Teresa. What's the best book you read in the last year?
Because I'm a generalist, I can't just give one focused answer.
I know.
A couple of books I'm going to claim. One is Unsettling Truths by Soong-Chan Rah and Mark Charles. I think Mark is actually the lead author. It's about the doctrine of discovery and how it's affected Native Americans and First Nations people. Mark and Soong-Chan Rah are both Christians. And it's just a really unsettling, powerful book. I knew the story, but that just unsettled me even more. And the other...
Remind us the title one more time.
Unsettling Truths.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the other one is just, it's overwhelming, but it's this book. I don't know if this camera's picking it up with it's Arabs, a 3,000-year history of peoples, tribes, and empires.
Oh,
It's this thick. And I am learning, this book has taught me more than any book I've read in the last 10 years, just because it's an area I didn't know much about.
wow. Thank you. Okay, now I think you would consider yourself an Anabaptist,
Yes.
or certainly with Anabaptist leanings. I've always wanted to ask a theologian this question, and I've never had a chance. So because I get you on the spot and you're on a live camera, I'm going to do it.
Mhm.
If you had to choose between being a Coptic priest, a Catholic liberation theologian, or a Buddhist monk, which one would you pick?
Coptic priest.
Oh, tell me why.
Well, I have had a love for the Orthodox tradition for quite a long time, partly because that tradition didn't go through the Western Enlightenment the way Protestants and Catholics have. And so it really is a different vision of the world. It's Christianity, it's the gospel, it's the reality of God's work, but they look through different lenses.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's passing or failing in the lightning round of our interview today, Jonathan, but you sure got top marks for me, and you've taught me a bunch of stuff already, and we're only a couple of minutes into our conversation. Let's
Great
move
questions.
on. Thank you so much. Let's move on to the other questions.
Okay.
So you're part of the CBM family, you're senior associate for theological integration. What exactly does that job involve?
Well, CBM for a long time has been committed to something called integral mission. And that means that we want to be holistic in our mission. We want to see all the dimensions that God made humans for and made relationships for flourish. So relationship with God, with other human beings, with the rest of creation, and with ourselves. So that's holistic mission, to integral mission. To carry that out, we have to join with God and know what God is doing. And so we want to integrate our convictions about God, our theology, our understanding of God and what God is doing in the world and wants to do in the world, with what we carry out in our partnerships, in our mission. And so my wonderful blessing and privilege is to pray, think, read, engage in conversations, teach, listen, so that we can do that.
I love how you are a facilitator of conversations. And as much as you are a professor, a lecturer, or an instructor, you really are a facilitator. And I've always found it really enriching to see how you lead people on a journey towards discovery, as opposed to necessarily kind of dropping the learning in their lap.
Yeah, I think that arises from my Anabaptist convictions and understandings. And I might even suggest that I could think of myself as a small B Baptist. That was introduced by one of my mentors, Jim McClendon. And that conviction is that it's the whole people of God who together are given the wisdom and discernment. And so we need to listen to one another and gather together, bringing our different gifts so that we can understand what God is calling us to and what God is doing. So that's why I listen. That's why I want other people to listen and talk.
You're also one of the very few people I know who've actually taught in each of our Canadian Baptist, well, English language Canadian Baptist seminaries. You've been a professor at Acadia. I know that you just taught a course here at McMaster because our mutual friend Sam Chase was in your class recently.
That's right.
And you were a professor for a number of years at Carey Theological College. You're still a teaching fellow at Regent College. What do you see as being some of the strengths and weaknesses of kind of current formal classroom theological education?
Yeah, there are some traditional strengths and weaknesses, but we also need to recognize that the landscape of theological education is changing at lightning speed. There's so much happening there. I think the traditional strengths are that it gathers a community of people together to talk and learn from one another in a very concentrated, focused way.
Mm.
The weakness is the flip side of that. It isolates a group of people from their communities and from places where they're going to minister or have been ministering, and that can form a different kind of way of thinking and communicating that doesn't always lead to a good transition back into ministry, back into mission. So that's one of the weaknesses. Another weakness can be the specialization.
Mm.
The way seminary curriculum has been organized for many years goes back to the University of Berlin, and the specialization there to try to maintain a place for theology in the university.
Mhm.
And that neglects wisdom, that neglects practical understanding and insight. And so that's a weakness.
Mhm.
Most seminaries are transitioning now, and some of them are just doing so because they're forced to by the pandemic. And there's a lot more in place, in ministry, learning and formation that's going on. And I think that's a really wonderful change.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would certainly have been my experience in the seminaries and Bible schools where I've taught around the world. The, the, the gift of offering the church a foundation
Mm,
and an ability to reflect theologically is an asset. But on the other hand, the imperative of adapting to the world that is changing so quickly, um, and sometimes the seminaries and sometimes we professors have been the most reluctant to actually embrace change,
that's right.
feeling that we have too much to lose in
Yeah.
the equation. Well, we don't
Yeah.
actually admit that usually, but Jonathan, as we've gone through this time of pandemic, how would you assess the general health of the church in Canada?
Mm, yeah. Uh, I, I, I've had a limited experience, partly just because I'm not traveling and speaking in different places. And it seems to me to be mixed. Some congregations have transitioned and are doing really well. Some are struggling. Some are struggling financially. They're also struggling to be a community. Others are doing pretty well financially and have found ways to be a community even in the midst of this. One of the things that I think could come out of this is for us to think about church differently. And I think this would be in line with what CBM has been leading and trying to say for a long time. Uh, the life of the church is outside the four walls of the church building. We gather in the building to worship, to be prepared and formed, to be healed of the wounds that we've suffered the previous week. But then we're sent, we go out. And uh, uh, for a long time, the gathering has been central
Mm.
rather than a way of serving,
Yeah.
and rather than a preparation of formation for serving. Now, in the new creation, we're going to be gathered around the throne and be worshiping.
Mm.
But right now, we have a mission, and maybe some churches that come out of this well and strengthened will understand a new way of being church. It's almost like there was a book many years ago written called Church Inside Out,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
and I kind of have that in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been able to pick up, like you. We can't travel around. We don't see it with
Mm,
except on a screen. But the churches that are going to thrive in the future are ones that have been able to adapt and
yeah,
find new expressions, new
yeah,
wine in
yeah.
old wineskins. Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned from some of my conversations is that uh, being on Zoom enables people who have been part of a congregation and have gone on to other places to rejoin with the congregation that they were part of for many years. because distance is collapsed by our technology, for good and for bad. And we've also discovered that some people who haven't been in a church building for years are now watching the YouTube recording of their old congregation, because they don't have to figure out, what do I say to the person next to me? How do I act in church? I can sit in my pajamas and sip my coffee and be part of this. So,
I read recently that church, I can't say church attendance, but watching church or participating on an online service in the UK is up fourfold.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic. So you and I share another thing, and that is that we both grew up in the United States. I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. You grew up, I believe, in Kentucky?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville, Tennessee, sorry.
From the time I was 10 till 24, and before that, always in the South.
Oh, okay. Well, I moved to the States when I was 10. I'm pretty sure you were a draft dodger when you came to Canada. No.
Yeah, I'm the right age.
You're the right age, but I don't think that was the reason. I think you came.
No, I came to go to Regent. Yeah.
Go to Regent.
I had dodged the draft by having a very high draft number in the lottery.
Is that it? So, there you go. Yeah. Well, good on you. Happy for that. And we would have taken you as a draft dodger, by the way.
Yeah.
Jonathan, we are all gripped by what we're seeing happening in this country right now. It is mind-boggling. None of us can be indifferent to what is going on, whether you go back to the Me Too movement, to I Can't Breathe, to Black Lives Matters, the whole situation with the COVID pandemic, the pending elections. As you think theologically about where the United States is at, where would you say God is pointing your thinking?
It is so painful. I am of such an age that I grew up in Nashville. My teen years were the 60s, so I saw the civil rights movement, Bobby Kennedy assassinated, Martin Luther King assassinated. I just thought, I don't want to enter into this world that the grown-ups have made for me. And now it's back again. There is such a deep, unhealed wound caused by chattel slavery in the United States. It's a different form of slavery from some other slavery. We've got to be really clear how devastating chattel slavery is.
Can you explain that, by the way? For our...
Yes, yeah. Black people, people taken from Africa and transported to the U.S. were not people. They were possessions. Yes. They were property. In the same way that I might sell a used car to a neighbor, used slaves were sold. In the same way that I might loan a book to a friend, slaves were loaned. And it becomes more devastating than that. The slaves were the white owner's property to do with what they would. And no one says to me, don't beat up your car, because it's my property. I can do what I want with it. And no one says don't kick in a wall of your house, because it's my property. And that's what chattel slavery is, treating another human being as just property, just a thing. And that's just that's in the founding documents of the U.S. And the United States has still not come to terms with that. And so until we come to terms with that in the history, and I speak as an American who's living outside America and happily so, although I sometimes wonder, God, did you want me back there to be a part of this? What is God doing in this? Where is God in this? I think God is in the Black church that has cultivated practices of resistance
Yeah.
and praise and protest, as someone calls it, for a long time. And white Christians in America just need to learn from the Black church. I also think Christianity has been turned in the United States into an ideology.
Yeah.
And an ideology is defended at all costs. It takes life from you rather than giving life to you. And it takes other lives rather than giving life to others. And in so many places, Christianity today is just an ideology. And it's tied up with white identity and supremacy, with material greed, with predatory capitalism. I don't know that those things can be untangled in time for the U.S. to recover from this. I think we may be seeing the dissolution of the United States as we have known it, and as the U.S. has perceived itself to be.
That's right. Yeah. You know, I've been reading David Brooks' book, The Second Mountain, and I really enjoy his writing, and he describes his own journey over the last couple of years as having been this experience of kind of tumbling off the mountain of success and notoriety and falling off it because of a personal crisis, and then discovering that life was about the moral commitments that we make. And he decries a situation that many people call hyper individualism.
Yeah.
And he sees that as being just this, that's the real pandemic in the United States. Well, in the Western world.
Yeah. That has made so much of what we're seeing in the United States possible.
Yeah.
And you know, it goes right back to Genesis 3. Am I my brother's keeper?
Yeah.
I have no responsibility for my brother or my sister. And that's deadly, literally, in Genesis 3. And it's deadly today when we say that we have no responsibility for the health and well-being of others. It's just devastating. And there's a whole history of the development of hyper-individualism and how devastating it is. You know, I've been drawn recently back to Genesis 1 and 2. And I think you've seen some of my writings on this, where human beings are made in the image of God. And I mentioned this earlier in connection to CBM's commitment to holistic mission. We're made for a relationship with God, with other humans, with the rest of creation, and with ourselves. That's how we become human. And when we think that when hyper-individualism tells us that we don't need those relationships, then we're becoming less and less and less human.
Yeah.
And we're seeing other people as less and less and less human. And then we're in a position where we can just blow them off, kneel on the neck of another human being as they say, I can't breathe. We're losing our humanity that God has made us for because of the hyper-individualism. That's a pandemic.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, Jonathan, one last question, if I may. I sure enjoyed talking with you. You told me a few weeks ago that you were reluctant to try to make any theological sense of COVID-19, that it was too soon, that we lacked the altitude over the situation in order to actually take a read on the landscape. I wonder if your thinking has changed since you and I spoke. What are your thoughts and what's your prayer?
My thoughts are still pretty much the same when we talked, but they're also represented by the 3 CBM chapels that I did that are online, self-promotion,
While you're promoting CBM, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I also think if I don't think they're worth listening to, I shouldn't have spoken them. So, so there you are. Uh, and just briefly summarize, I think the book of Job teaches us not to be too quick to say what God is doing. Our wisdom doesn't go all the way back or all the way up or all the way down or all the way forward. And that's God's message in Job 38 to 42. You people don't know what you're talking about. And so we've got to be very humble and cautious and reticent in that. But we can still say God. We can still say creation is being sustained, even in the midst of all of this, as it was for Job. I think exile gives us some help. In the exile, the people of God had everything familiar, everything that gave their life meaning taken away. And they faced a lot of temptations in exile. And the prophets teach us how to be faithful in exile. And Jeremiah 29, the letter that he writes to the exiles in Babylon, is a wonderful guide for us in these times. Seek the shalom of the city where you live. And then it goes on to talk about how to, specifically, how to work that out. And then finally, I think the book of Revelation, which is so often misunderstood, it is a revelation of the reality in which we live now. When John is caught up into heaven, the curtain is pulled back, and John sees what's happening behind the scenes, so to speak. And God is at work. And the assurance of the book of Revelation is whatever trials and tribulations you go through, whether they are natural disasters or persecution, whatever it is, God is at work. And God, the image we begin with is the risen Jesus. I am the first and the last, the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I was dead, and now I'm alive forevermore, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. And that's what we can learn more deeply today.
Amen. Jonathan, when I was in seminary, and I studied at a school in the south of France, a very staunchly Reformed seminary.
Yeah. I know one of your teachers, right? Henri Blocher?
Absolutely. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I used to say that my favorite doctrine was the doctrine of common grace. And I say that a little bit tongue in cheek. I think I would put Christology a wee bit ahead of that. But what I mean by that is that God is active in preserving all of creation, the fallen and the redeemed, and that his fingerprint, his handprint is on us all. He is sustaining us, and his mercies are present. And even this morning, when we read of over 7 million cases of COVID-19 in the world, those figures can be mind-boggling. But we can continue to hold our hope in a God who sustains all of his creation, animal, mineral, and vegetable. And God is present in the world, and we can celebrate that in spite of all of the difficulties around us. And Jonathan, I want to thank you for giving me your time today.
You're welcome.
You had to get up earlier than me to do this conversation.
I'm always up early.
Well, I'll remember that. And I'm really, really grateful. And all of your colleagues at CBM express our gratitude to you. Going back to that chapel series, everybody that's watching this will see the link to that, the YouTube series on our CBM channel. And I just want to thank everyone for sticking with us during this conversation, but mostly to you, Jonathan. Please send our greetings to Suwan as well.
Thank you. And my greetings to everyone there. It's such a privilege to work with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.